Thanks everyone for joining us today. We were on break last week, but it's great to be back. And we're really excited to have with us Tejesh GN, who'll speak to us about DataMeet. Before we go into this afternoon's coffee hour, I'll just take you through a few ground rules. To save bandwidth, it would be great to turn yourselves on mute and switch off your video in case you're not speaking. That'll help us listen to each other better. हम सब हिंदी और अंग्रेजी में बात कर सकते हैं, तो अगर आपको अपना सवाल अंग्रेजी या हिंदी में पूछना है तो प्लीज बिना हिचकिचाए बात करें. There's ample time for this in this session to have discussion, so we have about 20-25 minutes in the end. Please use the chat function. Both us and Tejesh will keep having a look at that, and in case if there's any burning questions or clarifications, we'd be able to address them. If you go next. Thanks, Nitya. So very quickly, there's just a 5-minute introduction that we'll do, following which we'll have Tejesh who'll present the work that he's been doing with DataMeet, and then we can have about 20-25 minutes to discuss any questions, thoughts, concerns that all of you among the network have. We've done this several times over, but just a very quick recap. We've had a few more members join us recently. The work that you can see on the web platform already is about 75 different projects that have metadata on. Along with this, the Slack workspace has been active. We're about 180 members now, and simultaneously conversation on both nutrition and food security have been going on, as well as the FLW's working group, which you heard about a few weeks ago. I'll just take this moment, if you go next, to also share with you that we are keen to seek your feedback at this stage, especially as we move forward in order to transition from this phase to the next. We're really keen to learn from you about how your experience has been with CoreNet, what your experience has been around not just the events, but also communication channels, and what pieces within this larger network you find to be most useful for your work as well as for your organization. And together we want to think about what potential futures there might be for CoreNet. So as soon as I finish in about 5 minutes, I will share the link where you will be able to enter the date and time that would be most preferred for you to schedule this conversation. So please do that. And I'll anyway also send you a reminder email in a bit. Very quickly, as you all are very familiar, we do these weekly sessions. The whole idea is that the format is the programming is co-curated. So in case if you have ideas for what we should be talking about in the coming sessions, do let us know. We also plan to have an open house soon where we can, as a community, discuss how far we've come so far and what should be the broad goalposts as we move ahead. We'll keep you posted about that. But in the meanwhile, if there's anything, do let us know. Over to Tejesh now, who is the co-founder and chairman of DataMeet, and will take us through not just the journey of DataMeet and what they've been doing over the past few years, but also specifically around COVID-19, what their understanding of the network and potential is. So I'll pause here and I'll invite Tejesh to share his work with us. Over to Tejesh.
Thank you. I'll just present my screen. So, hi, my name is Tejesh, and I represent DataMeet. It's a community of open data enthusiasts from India. We mostly focus on India, and we work online. And today I'm just going to take you through DataMeet itself, and also some of the work that we have been doing in and around COVID. Let me start with who we are. I've introduced myself, and since DataMeet it is a trust and like a group, which actually doesn't have any office or expenses, all of us are like volunteers, including me. And at this point, I think we are probably the biggest and probably the oldest open data community in India. We started probably in 2010, somewhere around that time. And and we mostly work online, and the community has people from various sectors, including, government, non-government. There are commercial enterprise, people from commercial enterprises and a non-profit sector, and research and students, and various kinds. I think at this point we are about 2,000 plus people online, on an email list, mostly as a primary medium of communication. And this is generally the question we always get asked, like, why do we exist? So we exist mostly because of three reasons. And the first one is, sometimes we don't have data. And especially we don't have data in public domain, or we don't have data in any like shareable licensed form. For example, we don't have any mapped data under a community Creative Commons license or an open license, and that's some of the work we do. And we exist to make such data be made available. That's like one of our core thing. And the other thing is, even if this data exists, it's inaccessible. The main concept of open data is that it's machine readable, and like most of the times that data that gets published either by government, and sometimes big enterprises are not in machine readable format. So one of our reason to exist is to convert this data into machine readable format. You can see some of the screenshots of data that we have made converted into machine readable format, whether it's pollution data from CPCC, or election data, or railways data and stuff. The third biggest reason is whatever is exists today can go away one day. This has happened multiple times. There are like historical customs data that got removed. We were actually kind of continuously downing customs data, where actually customs department publishes what India imports and exports on day-to-day basis. Like, so every day you get a product code, which shipping yard, what came, in which container, how many numbers, who imported it, who exported it, and so data like that, which is very useful for many reasons. And they stopped publishing this data after a while. I don't know why. We did some RTIs to find out why. Maybe sometime later I can go through that. But whatever data that exists today can vanish from the site. Similarly, it happened with some of the PM Jan Dhan Yojana, where they used to publish every day, like how many accounts got created, what kind of people were creating the account, which part of India and stuff, and suddenly stopped publishing. The other thing is, same thing happened with RBI. They added a lot of data sets to negative list, and the documents started vanishing from site. So the third biggest reason that why we exist is to archive some of this data so that it's available in the future. So these are the three biggest reasons why we exist. What do? We do these three things, as I said: gather, which is which includes downloading, scraping, or doing RTIs, or sometimes surveys. Surveys is the least explored one because I don't think we do that like very often. That's rarely used tool, but downloading, scraping, and RTIs are big. We gather data and we clean them, whether it comes through RTIs or downloaded from a website of government. We actually clean them, making it machine readable, add metadata so it can be understood by humans. And sometimes we do also write like simple APIs so that others can use it if they don't want to run their own server to run APIs, for example. And one of our biggest steps is to make it reproducible, in the sense we also make the code open. Like, say, for example, I download, for example, like COVID data from MOHFW site, and then convert into certain format and clean up. I have that whole thing recorded in the form of code, and also written it down, so that if anyone wants to convert from the raw format to the final format by themselves, they can reproduce the whole process. It's very important to do that step for two big reasons. One, I think it's important for anyone to trust the process, that what we are doing, as part of cleaning up this data. And in future someone wants to have their own or make modifications to that process of cleaning it up, they can do. That's why that step is very important for us, reproducibility. And the third thing is archiving V2 long-term saving, including on GitHub and archive.org and stuff. We do that for both data, code, and process. Like process including what we were doing while we were downloading this data, or cleaning it. We also do other things, but they are not like big on our list. But we also write mostly about open data, and then trying to help local governments to implement. Some of the governments that we work with are like government of Sikkim and like data.go.in. Some of the institutions that we have worked with. I mean. We try to write to them, also sometimes help them like by consulting with them a couple of times. I've also sent comments on, whether they are, when a policy is published by either data.gov.in or, Ministry of Science, or any of them publish anything that is related to open data. I think we do try to keep track of them and comment. Training, we do sometimes run workshops and trainings for specific groups, and we've been making smaller videos. I think they're probably like less than 2-minute videos, just like on how-to videos, like how do I convert, say, a GeoJSON into a shapefile, or that kind of videos. And we do actually, we have not run this year, but we do actually do once a year open data camp. It's like a bar camp style like conference. We do it in Bangalore mostly. But we're not done this year. This is our medium. I think for any online organization today, it doesn't look a surprising list of tools that we've been using, but we've been using this for like 10 years now. Everything that happens on email list. Either it goes on to blog, or like end product goes on to GitHub. And the biggest thing is, two reasons we always consider is like any conversation that happens should happen on an email list in a public forum, and our email list public read. I mean, anyone can read. To actually comment or participate, you might have to register, but anyone can read. So all the communications happens on that email list, and there are actually no back channels, except for I think there is one back channel of our volunteers for organizing. Other than that, I think everything happens on email list, and either it lands up on blog or on GitHub. All the text content that we do are mostly in Creative Commons or in public domain, actual public domain, which is CC0. And all the code that we write are mostly in some form of open source license, either GNU or MIT, something. I'm just going to skip this because I think sometimes what happens, sometimes I put this slide just to show that, some of the even government reports use the data that is produced by us. One of the example was Economic Survey of 2016-17, used quite a few maps, and the maps actually came from Datameet. I think it will be surprising that how many times even government doesn't have their own cleaned up data sets. I'm going to skip this too. There are two core policies that we really focus on. The first one is, since we are like an online community, I think it's important to be nice to each other. So we heavily focus on being nice, whether when you're asking a question or answering a question. We kind of, since we are online all the time, I think you kind of have that rule that, try to be nice, even if because you probably don't know the other person or what kind of situation he is in. So we try people not to use sarcasm and things like that online, because it's very important to be straight and clean and be nice. So this is like the actual biggest rule that we have, and anything else goes if you're nice and ask, help nicely. And the second thing is, biggest thing is, we do everything in public. It's very important that every work we do is in public. So like if you are doing some work, you're asking something, everything happens in a public email list. And every other work which ends up like either it's a code or data or a report is in public domain and gets published in publicly, and also under a public license, whether it's Creative Commons or CC0. These two are very core to our values: being nice to each other as a community, and then being open or in doing everything in public. So the biggest thing that we tell anyone, which is a surprising thing even happens today, is to tell people that this is a public email list, and everything you write here will be archived forever, because once the public email list on the internet, it gets backed up somewhere. So be mindful of that. So I don't know how much of being in public also helps being in nice, but I think being in nice in public also goes hand in hand. And since the community itself comes with a background of open data and open, I think most of the people who joined initially are also from had some experience in open source coding or development. That that ability to be in public and to have a public conversation of something comes quite naturally, at least to the core set. And I think people who joined later and stuck to that same core values because it's been useful to all of us. So the work that I wanted to take through all of us today was two projects that we were doing. One was around COVID-19, another one was maps. But since I've talked mostly about COVID here, so let's go through the one which we're doing for COVID. Actually, we do quite a bit of work around COVID, mostly on gathering and cleaning up the data. So this is the project page that we use. So the actual GitHub project, corresponding GitHub project is, one second, here. This is the actual GitHub project. If you go to GitLab, GitHub, so you can see all the projects that we do, and there is this COVID-19. This is the GitHub project where there is code data, documents, downloads, everything. So one thing we do is we keep everything, including the raw data in the GitHub, so you can see historical view and stuff. I'll probably do some demo. So so here, if you see our COVID-19 thing, we are actually collecting 3 data sets, and we're in the process of collecting the 4th data set. The first one being, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare's data, which has this data. Like, for example, it has daily report of how many are confirmed, how many are like how many deaths occurred today, and how many cured by state and by date. Why we are capturing this? Because I think MOHFW doesn't store historical data, it just publishes that day's data. So if you go to MOHFW, I think, so you can see this is the data, and then if I go to state data, so this is the list here. So this actually changes every day at 8 a.m. It used to change more often in the beginning, twice a day, 9 and 6 p.m. But now it's like kind of standardized, 8 a.m. And this data changes every day, and there's no historical view to this data. So it's only current, and they don't archive it. So the purpose in the beginning, we started on probably on 3rd day or 4th day when they started. To keep the history of that data, so every day we capture it, and then there's like a historical view at our state level, and it's available as an API if you guys want to use, and there are lots of projects which are already using it. This is only the government data. We have not done any of our own collection or reading through the state-wise or district-wise data. Of some of the states only publish on Twitter their reports and stuff. We are not gone to that level. This is only MOHFW. Just the idea here is just to archive this and give a historical view. The second data set that we've been collecting is the ICMR's, the number of tests done every day data set, like number of. So here, we also used to collect more data. I think now they have stopped they've reduced the number of data points. Initially, they used to give every day samples collected that day and how many of them, how many individuals, like, for example, if it's repeat or non-repeat, that kind, how many of them confirmed positive. Over that time, I think they've reduced. If you look at ICMR today, in one of the pages they published, I don't remember, I think the code does it automatically. What they do is they publish as a PDF file. I think it's in the report, maybe. I can share to someone. So basically, they actually publish a PDF file. One sec, I'll just try to move this top scroll bar somewhere else. Doesn't trouble me. So if you look at it, if you what they publish is actually a PDF. So we actually back up all the PDFs. If you see from day one till today, we do all the PDFs backup. And if you look at some of the older PDFs, so they used to have number of samples, number of individuals and stuff like that. Now I think like if you see the latest one, okay, 2 days, let's say this 14 days ago. So they have stopped everything. They just put cumulative total. This, I mean, it's just a subtraction of cumulative data. It's just the number of samples. They don't tell you how many turned positive, how many individuals did this sample contain, things like that. So we are now reduced to this. So what we do every day is kind of capture this PDF, archive it, and parse it, and then convert into like readable machine data, and then we do have like API to use it. And I think the third one was like, I think what got us most eyesight visibility this year, which was, media report based non-virus deaths that happened during the lockdown. It kind of happened on the Twitter where, I was actually tweeting every day, like how many deaths were happening due to lockdown, which can't be directly attributed to virus. So, and then I got contacted by, Kanika, Aman, and Krishna, whom I don't know personally online, but they're all part of another community called Road Scholars. And then we worked together to collect this. This is the data set that we worked, I think, along with the start of lockdown until I think lockdown ended, and probably a month after that too. So, but here is the raw data. I think like presented here, which is similar. If I try to keep the data set format similar, which captures what is a location, actual location, and then district and state, and when did the incident happen, and what is the thing. So before I mean, if you don't know what is this about, these are the deaths that happened during the lockdown, which are due to either suicide or lateral charge or hunger or just walking, tiredness and stuff like that. That can be directly attributed to lockdown in some way and can't be attributed to virus. And the way we did this was to read the newspaper articles every day and parse and document it. It had couple of process. One is to read newspaper every day, which you can, and also set up Google alerts across multiple domains, news domains, to get alerts on say lockdown death, migration walking death, and stuff like that, and then pass through those URLs every day, and then make sure that we are not duplicating, because some of the newspapers won't mention the name of the person, some of them don't mention the location and stuff like that. I mean, there were like many issues like that. I mean, that we kind of had to parse and clean up every day, and then document as a Google sheet. And I think the popular page was to publish was actually, this was the source page. I think this like didn't have much information. It was like a raw data. So I think it didn't interest many people. Or what many people visited was this my personal site where I used kind of publishing a chart and stuff like that, which had this chart of like various categories and number of deaths happened according to them. And we would publish this chart, this sheet in actually like a table format instead of a machine readable JSON format. It's the same table, where we would push what's the date, how many deaths happen, what's the reasons. I think over time we kind of figured there were categories we would put the death into based on the information available, through the newspaper. And location, which state it belonged to, it's kind of misleading. It's kind of the location where the death happened. The person may not belong to that state, because in cases of migration, for example, if somebody was walking from Bihar, from Bangalore to Bihar, and if the death happened in Maharashtra, it could be logged in here as Maharashtra, though both the source state and the destination state uh, went missing from this data set. Maybe someday I'll go back and read everything and do that too. And then wherever possible, we actually logged names. This was also done to do duplicate, like across multiple reports, and then put age. And we also tried to do what kind of business they were in, like whether they were contractors or migrant workers and stuff, and put into a category. Over time, I think these categories were not defined on day one. They were like, as in when we thought this should be a different category, we added in as a different category. So like we actually color coded them to make it easy, but we had like exhaustion. This was mostly during, migration due to walking or standing in lines for something. And then there was starvation and financial distress, police brutality or state violence, lack of medical care or attention, death by crimes associated with lockdown. And we didn't look at communal ones here. We try to keep that separate. Accidents due to while walking or due to walking. There were a couple of accidents that happened. Like say the couple traveling in a truck were met with an accident, or a truck ran over a couple of migrants walking on the side of road. There was a train accident to all of them. And then there was like a huge set of people who committed suicide due to alcohol withdrawal. This is quite sad, and those numbers were really high. We were a little conflicted in the beginning, but then we did add them to the list under this category. Suicides due to fear of infection, loneliness, and lack of freedom of movement, inability to go home and stuff. I think not on the first week. I think the second week onwards, there were a lot of suicides because due to these reasons. And we try to keep number 7 and number 8 as separate, just to because they are we thought they are different and it needs to be separated out. And I think there was one like a separate section that came in later due to deaths happened in Shramik trains. We kept it separate from accidents and walking because this actually happened inside a train, and we could get a correct number here also because every death that happens inside a Shramik train has to be reported to railway police, and one could get these details using RTA and stuff like that. So we tried to keep that as a separate category. And then we also put deaths in quarantine centers as a separate thing. This is not due to virus, but due to some other reason. Again, could be due to suicide or some other reason. And yellow is where we couldn't actually clearly put into any of these, and we were, but also we could still attribute to lockdown. We put it under yellow. But I don't think you should be limited by that. I think you can still go through them and and make your own conclusion because there's article link associated with each of them. One of the shortcomings of this exercise was did we cover everything? No, actually we didn't cover everything. We couldn't possibly cover everything. This gives just an idea of what happened. For two big reasons. One, I think newspapers were not covering everything. Something happened in a very small town would never get covered. And there was also, we couldn't get to all the newspapers. We did do most of the reading, like in probably Kannada, Tamil, Malayalam, English, Hindi, Bengali, and a little bit of Odia. We didn't have spreads to many other languages, like, maybe Rajasthani or Kashmiri, like only because I think we didn't know anyone or or we couldn't read it ourselves. Or I think maybe the local newspapers did not have an online version which we could get access to. But I think this is like a gist of everything that happened, which can give an idea. And we thought it's important to record it, regardless of whether it's complete or not. There are some FAQs. You can read through what are the shortcomings of the database, and then we did actually put them as early as possible to make sure that people know what they are looking at and stuff like that. As part of the data set itself, we have with every data set, there is like a link associated with it. I think you can look at the link and access it. If there was no link, let's say if we had from a hard copy, I think the document was uploaded to archive.org, and then the link from the archive.org was used. So there are certain articles which are posted on archive.org. Maybe so you can see some of these reports are on archive.org, because I think they were like pictures from actual newspaper. Like this, which are like a small scale newspapers, which probably don't have an online version, but somebody were able to take. I think this is actually still an e-paper, but there are some papers which had like this, things like that. But so everything was archived on archive.org, and so the whole thing's backup is also on archive.org. Like. For two reasons, we did try to back up all the news articles offline, because some of these links were dying. They were link rot over time. So we thought we should, hold on one second. We thought we should actually back them up so that, but I think it's on archive.org. I think one of us can search. Why am I searching? So there is this whole set of data sets on archive, and we copied every link actually, and then we have put it online. So if you really think, or if you can't access one of the links here, there is a possibility that offline PDF format of that article has been backed up and put into archive.org, which you can go check. I don't think we have missed any of them. We have downloaded all 400 or 500 articles for you to read and double check by yourself. This is one of the things that I think kind of got quoted in papers and in newspapers and actual research papers as well. I was quite surprised that of all the things, this became very popular. So these are the 4 big data sets, and the currently what we are working is the newer data set, as in every state government and some of the local governments have published what should be the price of hospitalization of COVID-19, and we are trying to collect that data because we want to keep a record of what was the government suggested rates for the hospitals, both for public and big hospital, as well as there are some grades of hospital, like smaller grade B hospitals, so that over time, if somebody wants to check what was the government suggested rate and what was actually charged, they could do that kind of comparison. Some of these documents are already going away from government side, so we're trying to capture them and keep them. For all the raw data, this is actually the COVID-19 Center GitHub. For all the raw data, you can go into downloads folder, and you can see actual raw downloads. So here is the there are some tweets are also backed up, because initially I think very early in March, maybe in January, there were only tweets from ICMR and MOHFW on the first patient died or the first couple of patients who died. Hence, we had to back up those tweets too. And if you really want to go through, you can go through them and regenerate your own reports. And IDSP is another thing we just recently started backing up. This is an institution which keeps an eye on the diseases spreading across, and they do publish reports on outbreaks. So we're trying to back them up because we didn't find some of them. Things like that. I think first step is actually just back them up and then write code to scrape and this. This is the COVID-19 related work that we have been doing. So the links are here. You can access them here directly, and all the data is in the GitHub. You can directly download if you are interested in just raw data, or if you're interested in any of the APIs, you can just ask me for an API access. We have not made API open because I don't think I have enough, or any of us have enough money to run those APIs as like a big service, so it's kind of limited. But I mean, there is raw data and formalized data that you can run as your own API. So nothing stops you from running. I'm sure there are other people who are already running APIs based on this data. So these are the two data sets. And then there was actually a MAPS data, but I didn't think MAPS is another interesting project that we did and we're still doing, mainly covering these things like assembly constituencies and parliament constituencies. We started working on the assembly constituency map during 2014 elections because there was no public data for them. So, and then we started covering assembly constituencies and state boundaries and district boundaries. Currently, we are working on village boundaries, and you can see some of the states have been covered. It's done. Some of them are done manually by downloading a PDF file and what we call georeferencing, but some of the data sets, like say Karnataka, are donated by other nonprofits. I think the Karnataka one is donated by a Bangalore-based organization called A3 to DataMeet to make it clean it up and open. So the initial data set of this village shape files were done by A3 I think in probably 2014 or something. And then they donated it to DataMeet. So we just cleaned it up and added more attributes and made it public. So that also happens. There are institutions, they donate data to DataMeet to make it cleaned up and make it public. So, but some of the other states are manually done, for example, Kerala and stuff like that. Kerala was, I think, much more cleaner version. I think we could do some kind of digital version and we had to just clean it up. Every document also has supporting documents where we got that things from. If you're interested in some of these mapping things, I think you can check it out. That's another biggest data set which most people are interested in. I will not go in detail with the maps because that's like a huge topic in itself. At this point, I'll just stop, and then if there are any questions or anything that I can answer, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Tej. If anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask Tej, or you can also put it in chat and I can read it out for you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. Well, thank you for this super interesting presentation. I really enjoyed it, and it was really, really clear. I mean, I'm not a big data person or a computer person. I'm a public health person. And so I really appreciate how clear you made it for somebody like me. I found the classification of deaths by cause of death super interesting, COVID-19. And I'm just wondering we've all wondered so much since the beginning of this pandemic, how much deaths are attributable directly to having the virus, and how many deaths are attributed to all sort of related causes. and like the ones that you list. And I wonder if you are aware of similar efforts happening in other countries. Are other people looking at the kind of I mean, I know that many other countries are talking about excess deaths, like in the UK, for example. At one point, they were talking about 60,000 excess deaths. But do you know of other initiatives where people are breaking them down by cause of death, the way you've done that?
I don't know actually if anyone in any other country has done a similar effort, but it was also the reason why kind of we did it, because there was no one else who was doing it at that point. If someone else was doing that, I think we wouldn't have done it. So at least in India, no one was doing it. I don't know if there were any similar efforts in any other part of the world. I mean, I think India was one of the strictest, if I can call so, lockdowns compared to any other countries in the world, and also like one of the biggest countries too. So I think maybe these were concerns very particular to India. And also, I think at that point, I think we didn't also think about any other countries. Or I don't even know. No, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. No, I think you're right. India was one of the strictest lockdowns, if not the strictest. And also the migration, I mean, the return migration, I mean, the magnitude of the return migration, as you correctly point out, resulted in a lot of hardship, which resulted in quite a lot of deaths. So that's extremely interesting. And finally, I just want to say, I think it's very worthwhile, obviously, to document all these deaths, even if you can't go for being comprehensive. You know, I'm sure people will, you know, some people might criticize, say, well, you can't capture all the deaths, so, you know, what's the point? But I think what you're doing is very important to illustrate the kinds of causes that are leading to people dying. And that's very, very valuable, even if you can't capture every last death. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. There are two more questions in the chat. Shall I read it out? Or,
Yeah, go ahead.
The first one is by Babita. Ethical concerns around data collection in primary research necessitates participant data privacy, consent, etc. While DataMeet's work might be based on mostly on secondary data available in the public domain. Wondering if you have thoughts on how open data principles match up with the participant data privacy and consent, thus potentially limiting the use of research data beyond original stated research objectives. Yeah. So the question is, I think, I mean, I think everyone else can also read the questions. We're not done. Actually, you're right. We're not done much of, primary data collection where we go to the individual and collect data. We're mostly concentrated on already available data most of the time, and trying to bring it to some kind of usable form. We were and we are still thinking about doing some survey of hospital expenditure in a bigger way, where we could collect some kind of did you go to hospital and how much, what kind of COVID related care you took from the hospital, and how much did it cost, that kind of thing. And also about some of the information related to death, or did any of your relative die, that kind of thing. We still don't know how we are going to do it. We're still talking about it. But one of the main principles of DataMeet has been everything that we do is going to be in open domain. So, and the second concern and the second related to that is, we strongly believe in openness for institutions and the privacy for individuals. So we are also very careful about, publishing any personal detail of anyone else. So there's a little bit of, we're still not 100% sure of how do we going to do that to make sure that, we are not going to expose any personal details of anyone and still make it possible that it's published in open. For example, in the non-virus death, for the initial few days, we were not publishing the names of the people and the age. But at last, we did publish it, thinking that the data was already open and up in the newspaper. So there was no reason that, there was no real way to secure it, because it was already in the newspapers, and we thought, okay, if it's already there, let's document it. It's fine. But if you ask me if I'm going to do like a public survey and am going to publish somebody's name and address or maybe age, that kind of thing, I might still think a lot about it before opening such a data set. So maybe at some aggregated level, I might open up the data, but may not be. And I think we're not reached a place where this has been in a direct conflict in our work, except in this upcoming data set. So it's taking a lot of time to even kickstart the project, because we're still not sure how we want to open it up, and unless we are sure that how we are going to open it up, we don't want to do it. So it kind of led like the reverse way. So we're not started doing that work because we are not 100% sure how we are going to publish it and how we are going to share it. Because the whole point of DataMeet is like sharing it openly. If we end up doing something that we can't share, there's no point doing that. So I don't know if it answered your question, but that's the path we are taking currently. And once I have a better answer, I think probably I'll get back to you. The second question is, Tejas, thanks for a great presentation. Okay, I think it's not a question. So I wondered if there was a way those of us who aren't data experts could support your efforts in any way. Yes, for sure. One of the things that we really want to do is, some of these ethical questions. So I had written up like for this specifically around death data collection, because deaths are not recorded very well in India, and the data around death gets. So let me tell the idea first. The idea was that there are about 130,000 people are dead due to COVID, like in and around officially today in India. And we still don't know who they are and what their information is. At some point, I think they're going to be just a number. Like say from 10 years from now, when all the government records are destroyed, we will just have like a number saying, so many so died. And that's all it would be. We won't even know who are those people, what were their ages, or, the one way to look at it is no way to humanize those types. The numbers don't mean anything. So what we were thinking is there a way to collect this data around deaths in a possible way that it can be published and not violating their privacy of the people who are living, of their relatives and people who are dead about themselves as well, because, maybe they didn't want it to be in public for everyone. So we're going through a lot of questions in and around that. What can be done, what couldn't be done, what shouldn't be done, and how do we go about that? What should be the process? If we can do it at all, where we can we do some RTAs with government and collect them? If we're going to do RTAs, are we going to do every district administration? Because there are 790 districts, and mostly it's the district administrations which does records of deaths and things like that. So in any of these steps, I think you can help. And most of the chat happens on the email list. So if you can, you can go through the email list. You don't need to join. You can just go through the archive and just see whether you want to go through and read and respond back, or join the group only when you want to respond back or answer. Or you can just email me directly as well, that if you have a point on anything, or if you want help anywhere. I think that will be one great help. Other point I can think is go ahead and use this data and see how useful it is. Or if you think it should be in certain format to be useful for the community, suggest us. I think we'll be more than happy to convert into different format or make some changes in the format we presented or how we collected what we're doing to make it more useful to bigger community. That's it.
Are there any further questions? Any other questions anybody else has? If not, then I have a question for you, Tej. And then that's really, so through the kind of COVID response, the government response, the states have been releasing data in a non-standardized way. Different states release different kind of data. And I suppose that will continue going on, like you mentioned, with like, hospital rates of hospitalizations and how much it costs, furthermore in vaccinations, etc. when that happens. So I'm just wondering, how do you deal with kind of that non-standardization? And have you thought of any ways in which you can interface with the government or do some advocacy towards some kind of standardization that the states can follow?
Yes, I think we've done previously. I think the one thing that we've been um, a little bit successful was like, when the data.gov.in kind of asked us in what formats we need to publish data. And like it was at a very broad spectrum that, we could tell them that, can you publish it as CSV if it's tabular? Can you publish it as either a GeoJSON or shapefile if it's, geographic data and stuff like that. The problem here is also there are so many, it's quite decentralized. Like every district administration publishes its own data set in whatever format they want to. And there's no like a centralized system to officially collect data from them and publish it other than data.gov.in. But in fact, in real life, they don't have much budgets or control or the power to mandate certain things to any of the district administration. So they are like, they're asking for a favor when they ask any of the district administration. So it's unless that power comes, and then there's a policy called NDSAP, National Data Sharing Policy. I think I don't know the full form. So that kind of gives you guidelines how the data needs to be published and what can be published and how it needs to be published. But the problem is that's just a policy. Even though everyone has agreed to that policy, it's not really a law or a right to ask. So unless it becomes a law and there's more power to that policy, I don't think districts or states will start doing it because this is kind of an extra work for them. I think we're trying to make as many people as possible to follow NDSAP and like follow the instruction. It's quite actually pretty decent document and pretty decent policy to follow and publish data. So we're trying to push government institutions to follow that and publish the data. There are few governments that are doing well. Like for example, Sikkim government does quite well. Government of Chandigarh does well. City government of Surat does a good job. So there are some people who are doing good job, but I think it probably will spread slowly. In terms of collecting, I think at this point it's just grunt work. Sometimes it's just manual work. For example, this hospitalization thing is actually a scanned document which is uploaded. So somebody has to actually manually read it. It's not even a Word document converted into PDF. So I can't even scrape unless I invest a lot of time in automating it, which I don't see any point. So it's mostly me reading or someone else reading this PDF document or a scanned document and then entering the data into a Google Sheet. That's sadly.
Thank you. I think we are at time. Back to you, Rohan or Nitya.
Great. Thanks, Romit. Thanks, Tej. Again, I'd like to thank, on behalf of all of us, a big thank you to Tej for sharing this really exciting and important work with us. I think, Tej, especially as we go forward in thinking about what the potential for CoreNet members to even collaborate with each other on data. As more of these questions emerge, I think we will take the liberty to call upon you again and learn from your expertise. So we hope to be in touch with you and take this conversation forward. But in the meanwhile, Romit has dropped Tejesh's email address here. So in case if anyone would want to get in touch with him, please do so. I will soon be, I've dropped a link here, but I will soon be writing to you all on Slack and email about the feedback that we want to sort of resume. So there's slots tomorrow and throughout next week. So please indicate whatever is useful to you. And early next week, we'll let you know on what the next coffee is going to be. In the meanwhile, thanks very much. We hope you had a good afternoon and Have a good evening. Thank you.